Hey everybody, welcome back to Reaper Pro Tips with me, your host and disembodied voice Justin, and the unsqueaky Kiri dog, as it took us a while to get going this morning, so the squeaks have already happened. Actually, I don't know if there was a squeak. I don't know, I cleaned the room so her balls aren't jumbled up where they usually are, so she probably just couldn't find them. Are you guys out there? I'm looking for chat here. I don't see any chat. I know Justin just went live, so maybe chat is late. I think chat might be late. I don't know, Kiri. I'm not seeing a single chat. Talk, peoples. If you're out there, let me know you're there. I don't see a single person in chat. I'm on the right chat. Anybody? Echo, echo, echo. Ah, I just saw the chat room refresh. Anybody out there? Yay! Good. Somebody exists. Thank you, Jedi. You are the first chat I've seen. I'm like, am I talking into the void? Not that, I mean, in the YouTube world, I'm always talking like out into the void to random people. But, you know, when I'm live, it's nice to have people. Had to poke it a few times. Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. Ah, awesome. Yes, I'm here. And it is indeed me. Yeah, muses. Justin was tardy today. I was ready to go live, like, right at 9:30. But then, like, Justin and I are doomed. Like, whenever I'm ready, he's not. And whenever he's ready, Kiri has had a butt emergency. So I think we're just doomed. I'm mixing up some colors while we talk. I actually made huge progress in cleaning up my area and organizing it a little bit yesterday. I need to do more, but there's hope now. There was not hope before. I think I'm about ready. Guys, to, you know how after you move, you, like, drag the kitchen sink with you? Well, okay, you throw out a half of your life if you're me, right? And then, once you move, you actually realize you could have thrown out another half of your life. Because there's stuff that you hauled all the way to wherever the heck you moved to that you're just like, why did I bring this? So I think I'm ready for that second purge. You guys, have you ever been in that situation? Ready for the second purge? Like, there's definitely some crap that I hauled along to California with me that I'm just like, yeah, why did I even? Why? I haven't touched this for the almost 8 months, guys. Almost 8 months since I've been here. All right, so we are trying to get, like, you know, serious progress done on our Lady Pirate, Ms. Fairweather. For those of you who got the ReaperCon stuff, you got a copy of her. Oh, we're talking physical. Like, mental baggage, I've given up. I just acknowledge it. We live together. Yeah, no, entirely physical. Like, I threw out and gave away a lot of stuff before I moved, but now I'm feeling like I should have done even more. Here, for some reason I'm crooked. Let me uncrookedify myself here. I mean, there we go. Let's just show you guys what I'm doing here. Oh, sure. Absolutely, Inara. At your service. Of course, I put all my paints away. Like, I'm trying to clear off my whole work area, which means all the paints that normally live up here, the paints that I use all the time, like russet brown, for example, and black and brown, and walnut, and all those great browns, went down to the drawer. So, along with everything else I was using. So it's like, I put everything away. All right, so for purples, probably the purple color is the most unusual color used. Everything else is pretty standard on this model. So well, first of all, what we're doing with the browns. For the dark browns, I'm working with black and brown as a base. The dark browns include her hair, her boots. You know, I'm repeating colors over the course of the model. I'm going to throw in some russet brown there because it's a nice transition color here. What you'll look at, if you ever put these next to each other, you'll notice now, given that black and brown is darker, but it's also redder. It's more of a reddish brown. Whereas you can see with russet brown here, let me get my black base, because my black base lets me show colors better. There we go. Handy Reaper black base. Little did you know it had yet another use other than being an awesome base. It makes the camera see the colors better. So this is more of a reddish, the black and brown. And then the russet is very yellow. You can see that yellowy tone. And I'm going up to polished leather, remember, and that's got a drop of russet in it. So essentially I'm using russet as kind of a helper bridging color here to help the colors come up more logically on my boots. Because if I just go from blackened to the very yellow color, I risk going a little bit of green or a little bit of gray, because the yellow plus the black may react that way. Whereas if I use kind of a color that's in between and even add a drop of that in between color to my polished leather at first, I can kind of bridge that. So for our lighter colors, I guess we did use a weird color for our, where is it? Where are you, Saddle Brown? Did I leave you on the table? I did! I didn't know what to do with it. It was so weird. So for our middle leather, our belt here, let's get Minnie in focus. Although it lets you, not having Minnie in focus, lets Palette be in focus. But at this point, we probably want Minnie in focus. Let me get her. There we are. Dreep is apparently the focus noise. So we're using Saddle Brown for the armor plating on her legs, this one, and the middle belts here, the ones that are wrapped around her dagger. So we decided to go with a little bit of a more different. Yeah, she's coming right along, Liquid Nebula, right? Thanks. I'm glad you like her. Yeah, hi everybody who's come in meanwhile. Yeah, I need to downsize Moonglooms. Like, I'm come to the conclusion that there's just stuff that I carried along that I really am not gonna ever use or paint or whatever. So it's like, now I'm pruning. But yeah, so Saddle Brown for the middle leather, black and brown for the other leather. For that cream color, we're using one of my all-time favorite colors. Happily, it is still out there. Creamy Ivory, 9144. I was shading it with a color that many people were dubious about, but it works just fine. In fact, it is the way, if you want to recreate an equivalent to stained ivory, which used to be the shadow of this triad, add just a tiny bit of rich leather into it. And that's what I've used to shade that leather. That's that warm color. It works so well because rich leather is a nice warm brown. So then you can create those nice warm shadows here on the creamy ivory. And then from there, we go up with creamy ivory plus white to get it up a little bit higher. And finally, the purple color that everybody really likes, and this last bluish color back here, are Eldritch Purple, which it was originally part of our Dungeon Dwellers paint sets and is a regular color in the Bones line now, 9463. And then Icy Violet, which is a color that a lot of people really love and never know what to do with it. So now I'm showing you 2 ways to use it, and also a bunch of colors that go with it on this miniature, since we're using Icy Violet both on her shirt, her tunic, you can see it, and on her scarf here, and it's also being used to highlight the Eldritch Purple. So let that be a lesson to you. Although if you're on my Patreon, I did a thing about Icy Violet a long time ago, 2019. Sometime earlier in 2019, I did a Icy Violet and colors that go with it PDF. So you may want to consult that. But essentially, using the color wheel, it is a blue violet with white added to it. So you treat it as a blue violet when you're looking at your color wheel trying to find matches. But in general, warm dark browns will always go with it. A creamy warm white will always be a good counter to it, because essentially a creamy warm white like this is a yellow or a yellow orange in color speak, because it is a yellowish, and browns are always a muted orange. So that's exactly complementary on the color wheel. If you look at it, 1 second, we can get it and show you. We can do this. So if you look at your color wheel, blue violet, and you follow your big heavy line all the way across it, you end up at yellow orange, and that's what this creamy brownie color essentially equates to. When you're looking at browns, just remember that they're almost always oranges, and creams are going to be yellowish, right? It's like Osirian Sand, which we used on the Sphinx, and Creamy Ivory. You can see there's yellow in these colors, right? So don't second guess it. Just call it a yellow and work with it like that. It's a yellow with a bunch of white in it and some other colors usually, but that you can still treat it. You should still treat it as, like, when you're choosing complements, you can still treat it as yellow. Now, you can also just use it as a warm neutral, because if you make it very light, it's really not going to fight with any other color. It won't even really fight. It won't like yellow because it is a yellow. So using like a cream to be on the same model where you've got yellow is kind of dicey, but that's like the only color that it won't work with. It'll work just fine with especially darker oranges, and every other color on the color wheel you can use cream next to with no problems. And then the dark brown's pretty much working with everything. Saddle brown is the weird outlier here. This lighter leather that we've got in the middle and down here. And the reason that that color will work here is it is a muted brown, but it is also working against colors that are themselves muted. And by muted, I mean not very bright. This has a lot of white in it, so it's going to mute it out. So even though it's a vibrant, you know, even though you can see the color, it's really snazzy, it's still not as bright as like clear blue, right? So there's a scale of brightness there. There's a scale of saturation and vibrancy and muted colors. Because we have used a muted color on this figure, we can get away with using that saddle brown. Any color, any model that you're using more muted colors on, this would be a fantastic leather color for. If you're looking for 2 leather colors on a model, which I was here because I didn't want a ton of all this dark brown. Saddle brown plus black and brown is a good duo because the black and brown is dark enough not to fight with the saddle brown, and they work well together. So if you're doing like giants or ogres or things with a lot of different kinds of leather on them that you want to use more than one color, but you still want it to be a brown, these are good colors to use. If you're also using just really kind of dull grayed out colors on something like a stone giant, that would also be a great pick for. Anything like that. Anything that's worn, stuff on goblins. This is a really good kind of worn, washed out leather color. So, and you can highlight it just like I said before, it's what we highlighted for it with the creamy ivory. So what we're doing there is we are utilizing the same color that we actually used to paint something on the model, the lapels and the cuffs and the pant. We're using that to highlight a different color on the model, which makes everything work better together. This is always the rule. This is why I tend to work with a fairly limited color palette on models, and then I mix a lot. And I do that for that reason, is because it gives you a very harmonious effect in the general. I am okay. Kiri had a bit of a hiccup last night, Val, but the back is okay today. Despite that, David helped me clean it up. That's the mark of a good boyfriend, when he helps you clean up your dog messes. Mostly he helped me to clean up the dog mess so we could play WoW. So self-interest for the win. But I'm almost to level 60, guys. Let's see. So I've got all these puddles of paint set up, and for those of you used to my MO, as it were, you know that each of these puddles is about 4 drops, and then I just added 1 drop of water to each one. I'm going to add an additional drop of water to my highlight to bring it to 2 to 1. When I'm working with a base coat color, I'm going to mix it 4 to 1 off the bat, and the black and brown is here because that's what I basically painted the boots with, so we want it to be at base coat level for touch-ups. Russet brown is these colors are very close to each other, so I don't have to thin it very much to get it to kind of blend in. So I am not going to thin it very, very much. I'm just going to do that 4 to 1 mix, and I'll add more water if I feel like I can see it too much. This one, though, is definitely a highlight color. It's going to show up, so it needs to be thinned more. So I'm starting out 2 to 1, paint to water, and then I'll go with more water if I have to. From here, we actually go up with the polished leather plus a touch of, again, our friend Creamy Ivory. Because if you're going to use an off-white on a figure, you may as well use the off-white all over the place when it makes sense. And it definitely makes sense when you're highlighting a warm color like this. Warm color and warm color. Okay, so that's where we are. It took a while to go over all the colors used on this mini. So as I mentioned, guys, we'll be starting some new models coming up next week. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw the Fire Giant's going to drop out of rotation, and the Gemstone Dragon's going to go probably sit off to the side a bit while we finish the Rock Troll. Once we finish the Rock Troll, then Gemstone Dragon will come back in. That should be closer to when Bones 5 fulfills. I don't want to work on Gemstone Dragon a lot until it's almost time for fulfillment and people are getting excited and they want to know how to paint their Gemstone Dragon. So, yeah, it's cold today. I agree, Inara. I had tea already. I need more. I might go get a latte. I don't know. It's one of those days. All right, so I'm going to mix up all my colors. Now, one additional reason that I might drop another drop of water into this black and brown is it covers so well that I can get away with it, and another drop of water is just going to keep it more wet in my little well palette here. The bigger a puddle of paint you build in your well palette, the longer it's going to stay good at the consistency that you want it. So we get our russet brown here. Russet brown also has excellent coverage. That's the great thing about dark browns is most of them have very good coverage because you're working with earth pigments, oxides. They all run that way. The only time it falters is if you have a brown that sneakily has worked in a lot of yellow or a lot of red and yellow, in which case you can maintain transparency. We did that on purpose for brown liner because we wanted it to be a little bit more translucent, because I wanted you guys to be able to tune that color depending on how strong you want your line. Alrighty. So now we got our starting colors mixed up. So you can see that mixing that a little bit of this russet brown into the polished leather brought it down here. I'll put the regular polished leather next to it so you can see. Again, I use 4 drops. If you always start out with a specific number of drops of paint in your palette, you'll have a better chance of remembering your ratios. Drop 1 drop into this. Now, as I mentioned, I'm not probably going to use this straight up. It's a very yellowy color, as you can see. Polished leather is actually a good color to use if you used to use a lot of chestnut gold. You need just a tiny bit of brown to it to match the old chestnut gold, but it's not a perfect match, but it can do a lot of the same things that chestnut gold did. So if you liked that color, then pick up some polished leather. Yeah, Gemstone Dragon is cool, but I'm going to work on some other stuff that's actually out right now. I've got those statues, the Greek statues that you guys wanted me to paint. I'm going to paint one as bronze and one as stone for you. And then I've got a Tabaxi, one of the catfolk models, and also a dancing girl to do some cloth and skin on, and I even have a Highlander model to do some plaid. So we will be doing purple. I played it. That's actually was my first MMO. It was the only MMO that appealed to me strong enough to make me actually step into an MMO. So I actually played with a bunch of friends who are actually still my friends now, like John Bono, who teaches at ReaperCon and lives in Denton now, where I used to live up until this year. That's where we became friends. That's where we met, was on Final Fantasy XI. So I agree, it was a wonderful MMO. I still really like it, but I swapped to WoW when they kind of let support falter for 11, and a lot of my friends just kind of had fallen out of it. And MMO, I find, is like, I'll stick with it as long as I have friends in it. But the minute I don't have friends playing, and then I'm just kind of like, I'm at max level, I'm done. So I didn't stay with it, but I do agree that it was a wonderful MMO. I played 14 at the beginning when it sucked. Now it's a lot better right here, but I haven't gone back to it. My boyfriend played WoW back in Mists of Pandaria and a bit after, and so we decided we would play that together when the new expansion came out. But yeah, Final Fantasy MMO franchise. If you really like story, I really liked the combo abilities stuff in Final Fantasy XI. I played a white mage. I've always liked the white mage costume look. Yeah, that's pretty much it in I wanted to get a bunch of different stuff that we could demo a lot on. All right, so here are our colors like lined up, and you can see that this is very close to that. So we're not going to get much difference out of this. This is really meant just as a transition color if these colors don't work well together. So our leather colors, this is the polished leather. You can see adding a bit of creamy ivory to it really brought it up into kind of an orangey yellow. It's a very interesting color, this polished leather. Like, I'm sure I'm going to find even more ways to use it as I play with it, because it strikes me as being very versatile. So, oh, did they? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, 14 was fun. I like story-heavy stuff, but David looked into it for me, and then he was just like, no. But he's not really a Final Fantasy fan, so... And I'm only kind of an adopted Final Fantasy fan. Like, 11 was actually the first time I had played a Final Fantasy. I watched friends play through 8, 9, and X, 10, while I was, like, living with them after college. And I really loved the look of the game, but I never played through those. I just watched. Me and my friend, it was her boyfriend who was playing through it. We would come home after school and or after work, and we would sit down, and he'd start up the game, and we would just watch the story while we ate dinner or whatever while he played it. It was fun. It was cool because you got to see it, but I didn't have to actually play through it. So, but then we would yell at him if he wanted to play when we weren't there. So there's that first layer of highlights here. Yeah, polished leather could be a glaze on bone. It could be lots of different things. So now we've got, this is essentially me taking the black and brown. I used a little bit of my my russet brown and a little bit of my mixture of polished leather with a drop of russet brown in it. And that's how that highlight looks on the boot right now. This is just the black and brown on this side. So what I'll do is I'll bring up this boot and you guys can see the difference. So I'm going to continue with my mixture of polished and russet. And I'm going to try to concentrate on areas that would get more highlights. And I'm using my Raphael brush today, but you could use anything. You can see I'm just using the very, very tip. So you could definitely go with a smaller brush on this area. I don't know what I'm going to do when this brush dies. Probably buy 12 more. There we go. Got it. We're so zoomed in, I've got to make sure that we can still see. Here we go. All right, so I'm looking at kind of where the highlight comes up on the leg. And I want to emphasize that. But yeah, Dave and I wanted something new to play. And since he had played WoW, it was pretty easy sell to get him to try out the new expansion, especially because the story looked good. So far, we've really enjoyed it. Alrighty. So there we go. So that's me bringing a heavier highlight straight up the leg. Not over the whole leg. You can see that it's heavier on that side. But that's because the light is coming from the front. And so we're focusing. This is a cylinder, so it's going to go down the leg in a line like that. Down on this side, it's going to go more straight down to the toe. But because her leg here is turned out, you're going to get this line going down the side of the leg, just out to the toe, just like I show you there. Yeah, I really love the visual style of the Final Fantasy games. And I love how it's realistic and yet hyper unrealistic. Like the weapon design tends to be hyper unrealistic, but the actual worlds tend to be very realistically modeled. I do enjoy it. But there was no way I was getting David to play it, so. Alright, so now we're bringing up the highlights more. The more you bring up this highlight, the more shiny this leather is going to look. So usually I'm showing you this on black leather, but today I decided I would do it on brown. And with black, it's a lot easier in some ways. You have less that you have to paint. But brown also lets you kind of blend things in a little bit. I think a little bit easier. Because with black leather, you're trying to blend up very quickly in a very small surface, and that can be difficult. So, just trying to get a little bit of a highlight down here. But that boot's looking pretty good. Yeah, I hear that Final Fantasy 14 improved as the expansions came out, but yeah, I was out of it by that point. I try not to give too much time to MMOs. Like, I'm even pretty much limiting my time on the new WoW. David's a lot more into it than I am, but then he also has just more time in general to put toward computer games, whereas I'm focusing a lot more on my Patreon, my coaching, my, commissions, all this kind of thing that I have to keep up on. So what I tend to do is let my workday drag on a little longer than his, so he gets a lot more playtime than I do. But I'm kind of excited, guys, because, like I said, I cleared up a bunch of just kind of clutter around my desk yesterday, just because I was starting to get crazy about it, and because D. Clearman is right, I need to work on like a painting project of my own, and the problem is I don't know if the rest of you guys have this problem, but if I've let too many projects build up in front of me where I can see them, I lose all impetus to paint. Where if I can pare down those projects, so I only have like one or two things sitting in front of me, I get much more motivated to paint. I don't know if the rest of you have that. Do the rest of you have that experience? So I had let like 5 or 6 projects all build up over on my shelf over here, back where you can see the chair, and that's kind of my staging area, and it was just getting overwhelming. Like, I would look at it, and even though so many of those, I would have this weird dichotomy where it would be like, oh, those models are beautiful, and oh, there are too many of them. Yeah, it starts to feel overwhelming, right, Scrying Eye? Yeah, totally. That's it. And it just kills the impetus for me to work on my own projects. And then that makes me workaholic because I go and reach for, something else that I should be doing instead. Yeah, so last night or yesterday afternoon, I accidentally ended up with a little extra time in my day, and so without even really thinking about it, I just attacked the space, and I packed up all the models that I really wasn't feeling it on, even though I'd already started them, and put them out of the way. David has a display case, where he puts them in there, so he can kind of look at them from time to time and maybe get excited about them again, but I find that is not really the way I work, so I actually put them away. I labeled their boxes neatly so I can find them again. But I just wasn't feeling it, so I need to work on one of these beautiful busts that I've got. So it's between the Galapagos Elven Templar lady and the... there's another one I'm going to start for sure because I'm doing kind of a coaching on it, which is the Art Libris Witch, which I've been itching to start. They're both wonderful. 2 is about my limit, so 2 is what it's going to stay. I know I have to get painting because I've got too many Kickstarters coming. Yeah, that happens to me for stuff like Warhammer Nomad Zeke, where if I'm working on an army but we stop playing, then I totally lose the urge to paint army figures. But if I'm playing regularly, I have the urge to paint army figures because then I want to put them out on the table and see them look good. Whereas if I'm just painting regular models that, I'm painting just for the fun of it, then it's not so much, I don't really have that game impetus. So now we're starting on the other leg. You can see how that leather, you're just highlighting the tops of the folds, guys, where you see it. Like with leather, especially with shiny leather, don't worry about anything other than the tops of the folds and the little details. See where those highlights are going? Oh, yeah. I'm only concentrating on the character models right now for my 5e. As you guys well know. But yeah, I think so. I think this boot is looking good. It's looking glossy. It's not like super shiny, but I don't know that I want to go super shiny leather with this because it's just gonna distract from other areas on the figure. I want it to be nice and tight and cool looking, and that's about it. So I think that this is about the level that I want to highlight these boots to. Oh, it's a Nikki raid. Well, thank you, Nikki Colas. We're working on brown leather boots, trying to make them look snazzy. Not too shiny, but somewhat shiny today. Then you've got to just fudge it, Val, like I did on... You have to suggest it, like I did on our Bard. Her boots are totally smooth. So I'm using a back and forth stroke. But your model is so big with that Mercy, you're almost going to have to airbrush it to make it look good. I think you went really big with that one. Like, if I'm doing the highlight on the back here where there's just no folds, I'm going to use kind of a cross stroke to suggest that there are micro folds in the leather. But I don't think you can do that. I think it's a lot less successful to do that on a large model if you're not, expert level. I think it's very, very difficult. Probably out of your skill range at the moment. So if I were you, I would airbrush those boots if you want them to look shiny. If you're talking about the model that I think you are. I feel like that model's in a lot of ways, it's very basic, and it doesn't have a lot of texture to itself, so that means it's kind of putting all of it on you. Like that big thing, that big project, both of the big projects that you're working on, I feel would really be a good time to use your airbrushes. I almost feel, Val, with your development, that that you should do the airbrush because you're confident with it. You should do it on those big pieces, but you should pick some smaller pieces because those are really big. Some smaller pieces to work on techniques like I use on these figures. Oh, she did. Yeah, she was working on the Dungeons and Doggies. I saw that, Kagero. I love those models. I have the first box of them. I have so many minis I want to paint, and I don't have time, so that's why I'm trying to organize my life and prioritize. Because, yeah, those Dungeons and Doggos kitties are so adorable. Kitties and doggies. Alright, so now we've got that front of that leg coming up. Now, I'm not going to take this this as light as I did over here, probably, because this leg is more vertical and this leg is sticking out more. So this leg isn't going to catch as much light, right? Hey, Nikki. You push the button. Oh, thanks, Achilles Blade. This is, Thanks, Twisted Doma. Yeah, they are really narrow. I painted them yesterday. They're really just a really fine touch. And I went silver with them because I wanted them to kind of show up. I also wanted more silver. Pretty much I wanted to be consistent with the silver buckles up here and the silver buckles down there. So I could actually go silver with these little potion things if I decided I didn't want to introduce another color onto the model at this point. I'm going to worry about the accent color once I hit, once I do the NMM Gold. Once I get the NMM Gold on here, I'm going to see if I have too many colors or too much and see if I still feel like I need an accent. Right now, it's really jury's out. I'm okay with her as is, but an accent color might be a good idea. Yeah, paint along is turning out, my recent paint along is turning out to be very advanced. Sorry, everybody, on my Patreon. There's like 43 of you at the $15 level. This is gonna be like, this is gonna be some serious effort, I think. But you can always go a little easy mode on it if you have to. Yeah. Yeah, Scrying Eye, exactly. You just gotta do some stuff for yourself every once in a while to keep sanity, right? Okay, so I'm a little bit, I feel like maybe my highlight's a little bit thick on this. I did the polished leather. Once I added, remember though, we did polished leather and we added some creamy ivory. And when you add any color with a lot of white in it, like creamy ivory, it gets more opaque. It gets better coverage. But if you're trying to do highlights, that could work against you. So I think I'm going to add another drop of water to my mix there. Alrighty. That might help a little. It's weird because the polished leather is very transparent, but then the minute you add any white to it, it's like, boom. Just like yellows. That's the way yellows work. Yellows look like they are really transparent, and when you're trying to get them to cover over something dark, they fight you tooth and nail. But then when you need them to blend in, they show that they have better coverage than you thought they did. So, yellows are weird. Just gonna go. I'm gonna leave it there. Yellows are weird. I'm doing a lot of in-between mixes here, too, like this highlight color with a little bit of my previous highlight color. Which I sometimes will do on the spot, kind of like you would do on a wet palette, just to get something in between. If I'm doing little touches like this, then I can do that because I don't need a ton of that color. I just need a fair amount. I feel like I'm getting, there we go. Yep, everybody's got a lot they got to get done. Now the holidays are well and truly upon us. And I still don't know if we're traveling for Christmas. We probably shouldn't, but David really wants to see his family, so we will see. We will see if we are traveling. Kind of playing it by ear. Get some highlights on the side of the shoe. We do need to pick out the details here on the side of the boot. Like she's got that cuff like she's got on this side, you know, that top cuff that the buckle's on. So we have to kind of bring that out a little bit over here. It's not going to get as much effort as it got on the other boot because, again, it's not like turning toward the light. It's more on the interior of the leg. But you definitely want a little bit of highlight there. You don't want to just leave it. Okay, so as this comes more toward the light, I'm going to hit it with higher highlight. And I'm going to hit the piece of leather inside that buckle, which I actually forgot to do on this side, so I'm going to do it with my highest highlight. Just a little bit at the top and the bottom. We just want a little bit of highlight in there to show that we didn't forget it. And I feel like I need to get back and touch this up because I've got a little bit of rub off there. Now I need this highlight to go all the way down to the toe. You're welcome, Moon Glooms. It's relaxing for me too. I try not to be too excitable on stream. There are plenty of other people in the world being excitable. I mean, we get a little more excitable on the D&D stream, maybe. But I'm pretty chill in the mornings. Speaking of which, my D&D stream is on for today. I'm hoping we get Zari up to her destination. The minute we get Zari into Port Abandon, then we can start on our next miniature. I'm not going to finish her out yet. I pretty much am thinking I'm going to work in the characters in turn, depending on who the adventure is focused on. All right, so there we go. So what I'm doing is I'm just taking a little bit of this second highlight color, which is mostly polished leather with the russet brown, and I'm just going to hit just a little bit, like here, down here on the top of the sole, so that you get a little bit of that highlight. And you want this edge to stick out a little bit, so you want to highlight that, so you can see where I'm highlighting on the side of the boot. Dogfather 1, are you using a well palette? 2, are you thinning your paint down to 2:1 paint to water? And 3, are you using a really good brush and unloading a lot of it? So that's the key. That is, those things are the key. That and a bit of brush stroke. You can see here. So here is my big brush. Here is how little I am picking up on it. Here is how much I am taking off of it, so you can barely see it. And then I'm applying it to that. Yes, yes, and maybe. Brush unloading and loading is key, because if you're using the palette and you're thinning your paint a lot, then it's got to be in the unload and load of the brush. So the question is, if you're getting puddles and blobs, then you aren't taking enough paint off of your brush. You need to unload a lot more paint off your brush. You should be able to do a really controlled line. And if you can see the brush marks, then you need to thin your paint more. So that's also the thing. Sometimes on the camera, my blends look better than they are in person also. Remember that often a blend won't look perfect just out the gate. You have to glaze it. Like, sometimes what you see here that looks perfect is not actually perfect in person. But, I mean, unloading the brush is key. Key, absolutely key. You must take a ton of paint off of the brush. I usually only put a tiny bit of paint on the brush at all, because you want control. The test is control. If you put down a brush stroke and you see a blob of paint, you've got it. That's not it. You should be able to draw lines. Your brush stroke should dry almost the instant you put it down. That's how little paint you're putting down. But I mean, a lot of this, like, that's not blending so much, but because the colors are similar to each other, it produces the effect of blending. So a lot of the stuff you see on camera isn't perfectly blended. The camera tends to make it look better than it is. But if I want a perfect blend at that point, all I have to do is glaze. So just slight highlights back here. We don't want a lot of highlighting back here because it's a little bit more in shadow. but we want enough to show that we actually cared about the model and did some work. Yeah, that's why I think I've gravitated toward using the gigantic 8408 in our, because I leave so much moisture in the body of the brush that since I've taken to just squeezing it out with my hand, there's still so much moisture in the body here. Can I get it to come off? You can kind of see. Can I show it here? It's still wet. It's still damp. And so essentially what that does is it keeps my paint wet when I've got just a little bit of paint down here. I've adopted that as an actual technique at this point, and especially for when the moisture is getting pulled out of the air, it really is effective. You can see how it glistens, see how much water I have in there. Like, you want the tip to be good, so you don't want to see like a lot of puddles. That's maybe just a little bit too much, but there, once I can kind of stroke the brush over my finger and see the moisture come off and dry, then I know that I've got, like, I'm not going to mess up my paint consistency. And I can load up my brush, and then the water in the back end of the brush is going to keep it wet. Now with, I think this is especially key with smaller brushes. So if you're using littler brushes, because you've got to have that moisture there or it's going to dry. Like when I use my triple aught Da Vinci, if I'm working on something very small where I don't need this big brush for, and maybe the big brush is kind of a liability, then I'll definitely leave quite a bit of water in the body of the brush. When I did the unloading your brush video Patreon, for you guys who are on my Patreon, for those who are not, it's patreon.com/paintingbig. You are very welcome to come on over. We have some free stuff. I have some free posts, so there is some free content there for you to nab. But then I also did a video on unloading your brush and kind of showed how long I could paint with each different size of brush at each paint consistency. And there was one, I think I was using my Giganto brush, where I actually had it exhausted the paint, but the paint was thinning because I had started to wick the water down into my brush stroke. So I was actually almost like getting a blended effect with it, which was very weird. But it just shows that I do leave a lot of moisture in my the body of the brush behind where the paint is lately. I find I have a lot of success with that. So it's something you could try. But don't dab your, if you're going to try it, don't dab your brush off after you rinse it on a paper towel or anything else absorbent, because that's just going to pull all of it out of there. That's the point. So what I usually do is I squeeze it in between my fingers, like I squeeze it here. But you can also just use your fingers to squeeze the water out. And you don't want to squeeze it really tight. Obviously, your point is that you want to leave some water in there. But it's a neat trick that I kind of figured out just by playing. Like, I started to do it because I didn't want to lick my brush, because I really do not believe in brush licking. And so I started experimenting with ways to get water, to get a point on my brush, essentially, without doing that. And that's what I kind of came up with, and then it has worked for me. Hey there, Lord Dave. How's it going? Say hello. Look at the mini. We're working on boots. Getting our boots to the point where I'm happy with them. Happy with the left boot. Need to work more on the right boot. Yeah, nah, not with me, Nomad Zeke. Too many possible health implications, so I'm done. I put myself hardcore into developing a new habit. Several new habits. So that brush squeeze is one of the new habits that I developed. And like I said, it's worked for me. It's actually made me a better painter because it taught me to leave more moisture in my brush. I realized that there are buckles on these boots that I did not paint. Thanks, Lord Dave. Oh, okay. Yes. Well, not really, because that's the same response I would get from an actual brush licker, Nomad Zeke, so sometimes it's not obvious that you're joking. Alright, I need to figure out, like, this buckle is very hard to see. Or is it even a buckle? I think it is a buckle. I think I see it now. Man, it's so hard to see this. I'm going to add some water to my paint because I need it to come off the brush really thin. So that means I need it to be a little bit thinner so I can get that tiny buckle. And the tiny buckle, yeah, that's good, D. Clearman. That's a good trick. So the buckle I'm talking about is this little one right here. And I think I can see how it should work. So I'm going in here. I can see the little tongue. There we go. Yeah, but I don't keep a mental list in my head, Nomad Zeke, about who's a brush licker and who's not. So it's a habit I decry and prefer to ignore. So yes, it is impossible for me to like tell online when somebody is joking about that and when they are serious. All right, so you kind of have that buckle. I need to touch it up with just a little bit, but there, now see how tiny that buckle is? It's ridiculous. Who does these things? Now I'm gonna bring in my black and brown to tighten it up a little bit. Yeah, that's a help. If you give people like you know, permission to give you crap if you do it, that's a great one, Lord Dave. Yeah, I don't know, I got into this once I realized, like, this is just like such an ingrained habit now that I never even think about like licking the brush. Like I think I've licked the brush once in the last year. And I don't remember what it was. It must have been something that interrupted my habit cycle that I ended up not having, not doing my usual thing or something. But I've worked hard to break the habit because I was an inveterate brush licker when I was a younger painter. Then I just got to really dislike the habit. A friend had health problems and they were possibly linked to that, so that put the fear of anything into me. As you all know, if there's an actual threat to my health, I am extremely motivated to avoid it. So that pretty much worked. It worked that way for me. Gonna put my white down here. I need just a little white to highlight this little tiny buckle. And I can, while I do that, I can actually highlight the little rivets on our armor down here too. So that'll be a dual purpose blob of white. Just gonna put some water in it. Just a brush full. Can thin the white way down, it's still gonna be really strong. Hey there, Gallifire, how's it doing? How's it going? Yeah, this is one of the ReaperCon minis. I'm trying to get as much done on her as possible before we hit next week, where I'm switching models, switching to a whole new lineup almost. But yeah, if you got ReaperCon stuff, she was in your box. So I'm doing the tiny buckles, working on the boots today, which are turning out pretty well, actually. And I've also got to remember to do her belt here and her cuff here, because those are the same colors. That'll really start bringing stuff together. But I'm glad you like it. Everybody seems to really like this mini, so. She's been fun to paint. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the new lineup. We've got a whole lot of stuff. So do just a little bit of highlight there. See, I hit the tongue and I hit the top. Now, I'm working with really thin paint on this white. Like, it's probably a 1-to-1 almost. It's close if it's not. I just used a brush full of water, so I don't have a precise on it. But white is so strong that even when it's water like this, you can see how watery it is. And this is where it's key to take all of it off your brush, by the way. So often, after I've mixed it, if I've used my big brush accidentally, I will clear off my brush and reload, and then I still end up dabbing it off a lot. Otherwise, I won't be able to hit this fine detail. It would blob all over the place. So we do not want a blob. So I want a little under reflection. Just slightly lighter. See it? A bit on that. There we go. And then a little bit lighter. So if I need it to be stronger, I'm just going to put another layer on it. And that's going to build it up to the point where it really, really shines. There we are. We have done a tiny buckle. And now that I've done that tiny buckle, I kind of want to accentuate this little strap so it's obvious what the tiny buckle is attached to. So I'm going to bring this tiny strap up a little bit, and I'm going to highlight the leather inside the buckle. at the same time. And I think I'm going to actually use a little bit to color in this buckle a little bit down the front of the leg. So it's not quite, it's a little bit lighter. I'm going to make it a little bit lighter just so it stands out. And I'll grab some of my white and mix it into my polished leather to do a highlight that's higher on it than the other straps and stuff to bring it out. A little bit of that. Just to make it stand out a little bit more. Suggest that it's a slightly lighter leather. And then I can actually bring in a little bit of my black and brown on the underside to separate it out from the rest of the boot. There we are. Then that strap stands out. Then it actually looks like you can see where it goes into the buckle. Yep. Yeah, I kind of do that, Max Styles. I turn it at least 90 degrees, because otherwise it'll paddle, right? So I tend to turn it like just that much. So I'll start out like this, and I'll turn it like that and do that. And however much I have to give it a good tip. Hey there, Dragon Pink. How's it going? Awesome, Lord Dave. I'm glad that it worked. It is always gratifying when I can give somebody a tip that really helps them. Like, that's why I teach. I teach because I hope to give all of you, each of you, a tip that really helps you, like, get better as a painter. That makes you happy. That's really what I'm in the business of. So good. I'm glad. Taking my highlight color and putting just a little bit extra. Now notice that's not blended in. If I really want it to blend in, I could work with it with my previous highlight, do some blending back and forth. But I don't so much want it to be totally blended. It's light catching the front of the boot. And I'm not as concerned with it being perfectly blended. I just need that highlight to be there. So essentially I'll look in a little bit and see if it really bothers me, and maybe I'll tackle that it's not like blended as well as I could. But if it doesn't bother me, I may just leave it. Yeah, that looks fine, really. All things considered. Yeah, now pass it on. If you're a teacher, then all I ask is that you pass it on, Lord Dave. Pass on the love. Instill the love of mini painting in even more people. That's why we're here. Make sure that our beloved hobby continues to grow. That's the goal. I still want to have awesome minis to paint when I'm, ancient. The only way to do that is to make the hobby bigger so that more and more people will begin sculpting and making miniatures companies and doing awesome sculpts that, make me want to spend money on their Kickstarters and stuff. So much good stuff out there nowadays. All right, so there's the side of the boot. I'm not bringing up the highlights as much as I am on, like, the front here. Notice it's not as golden or as light. Yeah, Reaper's got a lot of nice pirates now. Izzy really likes pirates, concept artist. So, and of course, a bunch of the Stormchaser faction from ReaperCon have made it into production, I think. So, yes, there are some excellent pirate sculpts. You should do it. Go for it. Many classes start with "I learned this from Anne." Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I know, right? Inara, that's so sad that art classes are just, yeah. I mean, it's one of the problems with our society. I hate it. Don't get me on, like, the American school system and its approach toward the arts. I could go on and on. But yes, teaching kids is totally worthy. If you feel like you're just a, like, beginning intermediate painter, but you can still teach kids and you have the patience to do it, do it. Get the kids in. That's what gives our hobby longevity. That more than anything. Mini painting's the kind of thing where if you tried it as a kid, you're very likely to come back to it as an adult, in my experience. I constantly hear from people who sub to my Patreon saying that they used to paint and they haven't in years or even decades, and they're picking it up again. So, like, it's never, like... And if you feel like your skills aren't, like, at the level to teach, like, just, like, be enthusiastic about your hobby. Like, show people your stuff, and even if you're not awesome, often people will be like, oh, that's really cool and interesting, you know, and maybe someday they'll try it. All right, doing a little bit more of a higher highlight here on the foot to bring the fact that this is definitely going to catch the light. Bring that out. See, we're warming up that highlight. I've got kind of a bumpy highlight there. She's got almost like a... This boot does not have the artifact, but this one almost looks like it almost is a steel-toed boot. It has kind of a lump at the toe. I'm going to have to minimize that. I'm going to go back and grab my previous highlight color, the one with the russet brown in it, and kind of try to fudge out that crease. Just make the top of the boot lighter. Sometimes details can get over-accentuated like that, and you just deal with it. Now, I did lose my shadow there behind the toe, so I can go and get some of my russet brown and kind of put that back in. Yeah, and 86 was a long time ago in mini painting parlance. Like, boy, nobody could paint back in 86. It was toward the end of the 90s that we really saw things start to turn, and then by the 2000s, then people were getting really good. And then, yeah, of course, beyond that, after you got past, like, when I was winning Golden Demons, I remember the standard of work that was during that time, and after that, it just hit the moon. Just started to be, like, just phenomenal, like, to the point where it definitely elevated to an art form. All right, there we go. So I reintroduced a bit of a shadow there behind the toe, but not hugely. Oh yeah, Tish, yep. You can be stuck in your old school groove. Just, you know, pick up some new techniques here and there, Moonglooms. Like my layering technique, you know. Oh, hey, I said we were going to do eyes today, didn't I? What time is it? Oh, we got plenty of time. I'm going to finish out the boots. I think I'm pretty good. Remember, everything is darker back here because it's in shadow, so I'll put one more highlight on, just a little bit of one, just toward the bottom. And then we'll do eyes. There, a little bit more. Okay, so now I have to do her cuff here with these same colors. Get the belt. This is a cylinder, so it's kind of a glove cylinder. It's going to have a little bit more of a highlight there where her the meaty part of the hand comes up from the thumb. So I'm going to put a heavier highlight there. Yeah. I mean, the internet makes it a lot easier, right? Yep, have fun, Nomad Z. Good luck with the post-op. I hope everything is awesome. I know how those go. Sometimes you'd be dreading them. All right, there we go. And I'm going to just put a little bit of a line highlight right down toward the hand where that leather probably sticks out just a little bit. Hey, you know, more craft supplies is better than less craft supplies, Time Stitcher. Like, encourage the kids to do whatever. Whatever gets them going. Just having any creative outlet is such a lifesaver when you get into that hectic adult life. So I don't care if they do minis or they do quilting or they do, you know, embroidery or whatever they get into. Just, you know, go for it. Encourage them. That's the important thing. I need some more water in my mix. Yeah, all that stuff. Galifire are great, great inspiration. Just normal art galleries. That's what David and I do, or used to do before the COVID-ness kicked in. Was go and just I have all sorts of pictures of paintings with color schemes that I really like and want to steal. Even photographs. Like there was actually a photograph on my screensaver last night that I was like, I want to use those colors, and immediately took a picture of it. David wasn't thrilled, but it wasn't his kind of color scheme. Don't know what I'm going to use it on. Maybe I'll use it on my new mini. Alright, there's that. Now it's just the belt. Then we can do some eyeballs. Yeah, I did oil painting with 4-H. Like, sometimes we were lucky. We had an artist in our 4-H community who was willing to teach kids. So I got to play around with oil paints when I was like 12, 13, 14. And my parents also bought me oil paint, paint by numbers, which were a thing then. I don't know if they are anymore. All right, so just going to get this broad belt and just try to focus my highlights toward the front, because the belt is also a cylinder as it's wrapping around her waist. So you're going to have highlights like front, sides, and rear. And most of the highlight is going to be up near the buckle. But you got to make sure not to totally lose the buckle there. So let's see, you got to put a highlight in the middle of that broad belt. Don't even look at the technique, look at the colors. Like, so you can get some great ideas for color schemes. Like, it's rare that I go and think about using a different technique because of a painting that I see, but it's very common for me, especially on, like, I like the Baroque color schemes with those rich dark browns and reds, and then the pops of blue and green they used. They're just so good at light and dark. And top of this belt's going to get a higher highlight. Probably going to have to come up higher on this. So I'm going to mix some white into my polished leather mixture to get a higher highlight. Just a tiny bit of one. I want to hit this. And this is where tiny touches make a difference. You're trying to put in a tiny little highlight so that the details stand out here, if you can. And in truth, this belt is close enough to all of this that it's going to kind of blend in. But at least by putting some effort into it, it'll stand up to everything around it. Because it's a darker color, it does tend to fade back, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine. You don't have to try to take everything up to a super bright color. But I will bring the highlights up a bit more. And then I might glaze with the dark brown again. That's one thing you can do if you want to bring out those highlights, but you don't want to lighten the belt too much. And I think that's going to be way too bright. Got a lot of paint on my brush too, so when I see a lot of paint on my brush, I know I've got too much, and I don't even touch the mini with it. Go back and reload so that I can control it. . 'Cause 'it. 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 'Cause 20 minutes. There, that's pretty good. That's got it all figured in pretty well there. Still feel like I need that to be a little bit browner. Want to keep my highlights, but also keep the color. All right, I think that's okay. I think I want actually some brown liner real quick, or some walnut. One sec. Walnut will work. So what I want here is I want a dark line between the belt on her waist and the corset right above it. I've lost my lining there a little bit, and I want a definite dark shadow. So I'm going to grab some walnut, which is near black, and throw a little water in it so I can get a nice thin line. This is probably about 2-to-1 out of the gate. Walnut has great coverage, so I can get away with that. All right, so I'm going to put a dark line in here. It's a real thin one. But I want the belt to stand out from the corset a little better. That'll work. Everything is so crowded together because there's so much detail in such a small area on this model, and there's only so much you can do. So do what you can, and then let it go and move on to another part of the model. There, that's looking okay. Oh, yeah. Yeah, Time Stitcher. Well, just give them their head. They don't have to do what you do. I mean, I was a child who suffered from a parent wanting me to go into the career that they did, and I ended up in a totally different career that I'm much happier in. I mean, if your kid really is the type to like the same sort of thing you do, they'll eventually come back to it. Or maybe they won't, but it's either way, you know. Let's do what you, give them their head as much as you can. Without making them in danger. Alright. Just trying to use that walnut to kind of crisp up a few lines up here as well. Make everything look a little bit tighter. Let's see here. All right, let's try some eyeballs. Actually, it's good that I got walnut out because I can use this. So when you've got eyes in shadow, you only want the whites to go gray, and usually a brownish gray is good. This is also a good technique to use for eyes that are at a distance. And the color I usually reach for if I have it is weathered stone, and sometimes put a little white in it. See, but instead here with what I have on the palette, I'm just going to mix pure white and walnut, which will end up with a color that's very like weathered stone. So, and I want it to be pretty heavy on the white. I've gotten away from using, I'll still use pure white for eyes sometimes if they're very tiny to make the white actually stand out, but more and more I go to an off gray, which is more realistic looking, and so it's entirely up to like your style. But I think that's about what I want right here. Now remember, even though this looks really dark for the white of an eye, it's going up against these very dark shadowy eyes that I've blocked in with a walnut. So it's still going to look really light when I lay it down. It's just not going to be pure white. Pure white is very garish on an eye if it is at all large. So loading up my paint. Because it's got a lot of pure white in it, I can thin it down really nicely and it'll still cover. So I'm going to go across. I filled in the eye socket with a dark color, and now I'm going to use this gray to go across the entirety of the eye. You can see it. The point here is that you should be able to see the expression, but because she's got this huge hat, you can't go with like a really pure white eye. It'll look weird and glowy. So leave the dark edge around, the dark around the edge. And it's, if you mess it up, it's easier to just fill in the whole eye socket again with the dark and then try again than it is to try to fix the outline. Gallifire, with the stuff that I finish, and so far we've only finished like one thing, which is Juliana. They're either going to go to Reaper or I will sell them on my Patreon. The people in my $10 and up tier get first word on when I sell something. And they get the opportunity to bid on it. So sometimes, like, Ron is going to get Juliana. I'm going to send her to Reaper. Pardon me, I just noticed a issue there. But some stuff is definitely going to get sold on the Patreon. Because I am a starving artist. My income, like, the Patreon is most of my income. And so this lets me make a little extra cash to help pay for Anne and Kiri's food. Keep Anne and Kiri in food. So this one I don't know. I'm going to ask Ron if he's got an example of her already. I'll do that for a lot of these, actually. I know there are some models that he really wanted. Like, he really wanted the female Wraith model that I did. But David loves this mini, so this one's staying with us. And then there was one other one that he was like, he wanted Snack Lady, but I don't know about Snack Lady. Like, I have to finish her still. She's really cool, though. So yeah, there's some models that Ron would like, but that he's not getting. But I have to ask him about the female duelist we're working on, and then the pirate girl here as well. Yeah, my Patreon is patreon.com/paintingbiggallifire if you are not on it. That's pretty much, since this is kind of my fan base, that's where I put things up when I have them. I paint so little for sale. Like, there's so few Anne models available for sale these days. There we go. So, correct the eye. So now we've got our whites in. Scrying eye, it's a mixture. Normally I go for weathered stone, which is 9087. But you can mix walnut with pure white and get a color that's a lot like weathered stone. So that's just what I did. So weathered stone plus a little pure white if you want it lighter than weathered stone. Or you can mix the walnut and white. I often just mix walnut and white these days because those are two colors I almost always already have open on my palette. So instead of reaching for another color, I just mix those. And I mix them to the bright or darkness that I need depending on, you know, if the eyes are in shadow, if they're small, if they're large. If you were working on a bust, I would go with a gray even darker than that. So yeah. Yeah, I don't know where... Do I have Juliana? I don't know if you saw her Gallifire here. This is the one that Ron gets. Everybody likes Juliana because she's stripy. So this one's going to Reaper. I just have to actually like get down to the post office. She's got her little basket, and she's got her tiny little hedgehog friends, and her scythe, and her shiny, shiny hair, which is really pretty, and her dress. So yeah, so that one's going to Ron. Ron gets that one for sure. And I kind of was holding off because I wanted to finish a couple more and maybe send him. The thing is with Ron that if I say, hey, Ron, do you want this? He's probably going to go, yeah, no matter what it is. And I'm like, no, I really need to know if you need it, because if you don't need it, I need it. I need it to pay for Kiri's food. Nah, I can't do that, Val. It won't work. The problem is, the thing is that Ed doesn't care. And Ed's the one canceling paints. So that strategy is not a workable strategy. All right, let's do the dots in the eyes. I'm going to use walnut because it's very solid. I tend not to use black. Walnut is a very high coverage paint that you can thin down and it still has good coverage. The great thing about that is that then you can get it to do micro drops in the eye. Always come from below. Stop your brush with the upper lid. Go toward the center. And use that kind of start your eye. That's very cat's eye. I need to enlarge that a bit. Always paint on the exhale because you're relaxing. If you suck in your breath and hold it, you're going to shake. I think I need this to go even a little bit bigger. Doing a colored iris at 28 millimeters, extremely difficult, sometimes impossible unless you completely reshape the eye. I'm just trying to like get the... There we go, that's good. All right, next eyeball. I always try to start in the middle. Of the eye, and that way you can kind of push it one way or the other to make sure your eyes line up. But my initial dot is kind of my starting point, and then I'll adjust from there. So I start with a very small dot. Almost there. A huge one, Dragon Pink. I should use a smaller one, but I'm using my huge size 1 Raphael 8408, but the tip is so tiny that I can do it. Like, this is the only brush I have that will stand up to, like, normally I would use... The problem is that I've removed my Da Vinci from the, my Da Vinci's from the immediate thing. Oh, that's too long. Hold on. Wrong Da Vinci. I have 3 different Da Vinci's over here, and one of them is very, very long. And pointy. So, okay, so the brush sizes that I use. Yeah, the Raphael 80, I know a lot of people are picking up the 8404, but 8408 is the one that I like. So, I should use something more like this, which, you know, see, has the same kind of tip, like same sharpness of tip. This is a triple-aught Da Vinci Maestro, Series 10. And then I also use the Series 10 size 1 for a lot of different stuff. Hold on, let me get that over here. Ah! I'm trying to squeeze the water out of it with the wrong hand, and it's not liking it. So that one, this is the Da Vinci Maestro Series 10 size 1. This is usually my eyeball brush. Long and narrow. But lately, like I said, I've just been using the... You can see they're very similar when you get down to the tip. Very similar in the tip size and shape. See? So these two are my two like go-to brushes. The Da Vinci size, they're both size 1s, but because they're different series, they're very different in size. So really, these are the only 3 brushes, and this is the size gradation that I use, and I almost never use the smallest. The tip is the key. I keep telling people, especially when you're using thinned paint, you've got to have a long, narrow brush. You don't want a big, fat brush. You'll have diminishing returns that way. You'll tend to get too much paint on the brush, for one thing. All right. Gotta adjust that eye. Didn't quite touch the bottom of the lid. She's kind of squinting a little bit, so I do want that pupil and iris to touch the lower lid. Almost. Now I need to adjust it so that it goes more that way. So, tiny adjustments. Yeah, I gotta get a good one. Oh, Chia. Like, gotta get a good one with a really, really, really good tip. Like, I like Da Vinci's. And the Raphael, it works really well for me. But, you know, just get something with a really good tip. And remember, you have to thin your paint, or it's not going to come off of these long, narrow tip brushes. Like, thinning your paint is key if you want that to work. I work, this paint's probably a 2-to-1 paint to water, but because Walnut Brown from Reaper has such great coverage, I can thin it to that point and still have it be very solid. I'm going to try to adjust this eye, one sec. So the reason that I go quiet when I'm painting the eyes is that I'm painting on the exhale. So I'm exhaling and painting to steady my hand and get the eyes to line up. So the eyes are definitely there. You can see them. They're not huge and glaring. Yeah, I know. I bought them out. Tori's not. Sadly, Tori was our favorite vendor, and now he's doing like real stuff, like his graphic design stuff that he really loves. So can't begrudge the man if he's quit his retail miniature store effort in order to focus more on a job he really likes. So cannot really hold that against him. Now I can try to put a little tiny highlight in each of these pupils, but it isn't really suitable. Yeah, the eyes, I mean, it's just go slow and use a really sharp tip and thin your paint. All Reaper paint has flow improver already in it, so I'm just using water. I'm not using any additional flow aids to get these. But yeah, putting a highlight in the eye wouldn't necessarily be suitable because we have them very much in shadow, and it's convincingly in shadow too. So putting extra highlights in doesn't really serve the purpose of this model with that heavy shadow over her eyes. I think the eyes are pretty good. She's looking a little bit off to the side, which is fine. Because she does have her sword out, and she looks like she might be, Oh, are you giving him crap, Estalis? Tori, I blame you. I fell in love with this brush because of you. And now I have to order them from super expensive stores instead of giving money to my friend. So if Tori's really next to you, then yeah, I hope you heard that. We miss you. Bring Hanger 18 back. All right. So there we are. And I think the eyes look pretty good. Let's see, what else do we have time for? We're actually almost set. Ebony skin can be used in place of walnut for this. Ebony skin is as dark as walnut. It's just got more blue in it. So you could absolutely use ebony flesh as a replacement for this walnut brown. It does have the same high coverage. It'll thin roughly the same, and it'll thin to a near black color, so you can use that instead. Gotta poke him. Well, when he gets lonely, and wants us all to run to him for brushes and sexy busts, that's... Yeah, ebony flesh is a multi-talented color. It's one of those saturated darks that works well for a very large number of things. So yeah, we got a fair bit here done, guys, today. I don't know what we're going to do tomorrow. If we're still going to be on this lady, I might do the NMM Gold. We're getting really close to done on her. I don't really want to give up on her when we're so close to done. Like, once we've got the NMM Gold on, like, the only thing after that is, like, just figuring out what the heck I'm doing with the gun or accent color, if I'm doing an accent color, and then maybe some freehand on the sash. And tomorrow's our last day of working on her that we can do, so... Yeah, right, Scrang. I know. Not hashtag. That's the not hashtag. I don't know about freehand. I've been thinking about freehand on this sash, but I just haven't come up with any great ideas. Got a little bit of flash there that we missed when we prepped the model. I'll take that off. But other than that, yeah. But I'm not so worried about that, Val. I mean, the sword is just silver NMM, and I've done so many swords and stuff for you guys at this point, and I will be doing more swords for you. So it's like, I didn't prioritize that model, or that part of the model. Yeah, I could give her a hook hand. It's just painting. Like, just paint. Enjoy it. Try new techniques. Like, when you see a technique, like a highlighting technique that can improve you, like, give it a try. Try to troubleshoot it. Like, getting better at this hobby is not impossible. I went from decent to very, very good over the course of 6 months to a year. So it's not anything that I've been painting for like 30 years, but it didn't take that long to get good. I'm still improving, which constantly like blows my mind. Like, I look at previous work and I look at current work and I go, oh, well, I guess I am getting better. But now it's just like, it's not so much that I'm pushing myself to get better. It's just that I'm getting ever more familiar with everything. And I do try new techniques and textures and lighting effects and things like that. So yeah, well, you've got a lot to practice on. 40 Reaper Minis is pretty good practice load. Oh. Yeah, well, actually, though, then damaged nervous system's not a deal breaker, Chia. It's not. I have a friend who has, like, brain lesions and still manages to paint pretty well. What you do need to do then, if you have that, is work on your muscle memory. Work on doing a really repetitive brush stroke. Like, always make sure that your brush is in, like, this kind of arc. Like, don't do a lot of this, right? Keep your brush stroke like the same brush stroke for everything. And if you do that, your muscle memory can compensate for a certain amount of nerve damage. So it's like, you can still do it. You can still do it. You can still improve. You can still paint a decent mini. I've seen this happen. But work on your muscle memory. You're going to have to work harder on that than other people do. You're going to have to try to, like, remind yourself to always be using the same brush stroke. Probably get yourself one good all-purpose brush and just use that and use the same stroke and do it on everything you do. And that's going to steady your hand a lot. It's going to make it easier for you to, don't clamp down on the brush either. You want to hold it really naturally and lightly. So those two tips. Same brush, same direction of brush stroke. If you need to get a different angle, move the model around. Don't move your brush hand. And then, if you can, brace, obviously, but that only helps some people. I tend to brace by just putting one part of my hand on another part of my hand, and then I brace my arm on the table. But keep good posture. Otherwise, you'd be like me with a wrecked back. But yeah, so don't worry about it. Nerve damage is not a deal breaker. And then there are tips and tricks too. Yeah, you gotta brace. You gotta you can use a pill bottle to stick your minis on. Like, I've got dog med models that I use. Lately I just like these little wooden blocks with the sticky tack on top. But yeah, you gotta have something. Then you can brace your hand on the block. You can brace your hand on your hand. And that just helps you get a nice stroke. But after that, it's muscle memory. When you've got nerve damage, what I learned very much from watching my friend is that bracing doesn't do a lot, but if you paint a lot, the muscle memory will get good enough that you can compensate for it to a point. And how much you can compensate depends on you. Everybody's an individual when it comes to this sort of thing. But it's not like, don't lose hope or just be sad and throw your hands in the air and give up. You're right. You're never going to get better then. No, it's not easy, but muscle memory can help you a little bit. I'm not saying this is going to be easy. This is going to take a lot of work. But you can help it if you keep doing a consistent stroke where you hold the brush lightly and you move the model around instead of that. Yeah. Yeah, bracing doesn't solve everything, though. Bracing is just like making sure that... bracing just gives you a steady point to start from. It doesn't address the issue if you have a finger tremor. So, yeah, I totally get that. If you believe that you will never be this good, you're right. But you can try to get good enough that you're happy with your work. That's my goal. Like, is to make sure you guys enjoy the hobby, and that you're happy with what you're producing. So, but I mean, come on, there are people with like no limbs that climbed Mount Everest. So, it's like when you look at things that you look at you. Somebody always has it harder than you. So really, it's just a question of like what you can do to be happy with what you have. That's really, you can never compare to anybody, and it's but don't lose hope. I don't like people losing hope. It makes me sad. I really feel like bracing is like not the answer. It's muscle memory. I really feel like it is that. That's your chance to. Bracing only goes so far. Like I said, it's a band-aid. It's not the solution. And it just mix up a little bit more of highlight here. Anyway, many good hopes to you, Chia, that you will actually get better than you believe you can. I believe you can get better than you think you can. And Kiri's got tail signs, so I gotta go. Justin, set us up with a raid. I'm gonna take the dog out. Thanks,
Okay, bye.
everybody. Thanks. I'll see you tomorrow. I love you. I have to rush my dog outside. But she had good timing. Bye.
Thank you guys for coming out. We appreciate you as always. Don't forget tonight is Reaper Live, as well as Painting Platinum at 3 o'clock today. We're going to be rating Zambies. Say hi to Zambies for us, and I hope to see all of you on Painting Platinum as well as Reaper Live tonight. Thank you guys.